My next guest is Alfonzo Mendoza. He is an instructional technologist and Google Innovator from South Texas. He has 15 years of experience in education and a master's in educational technology, along with a graduate certificate in e-learning and a graduate certificate in technology leadership in education. He's a servant leader and is always looking for ways to help his learning community use the power of technology. Welcome to the podcast, Alfonso.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be on the receiving end of questions, as often, I get to ask questions to a lot of the guests, but I really appreciate this invitation and I'm excited to share.
I'm excited to have you on, and we'll talk about your podcast, My EdTech Life, in a little bit. But first of all, I'll ask the question I start off with everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oh, yeah, the trenches. Well, I'll tell you what, back in 2019, I had just graduated. Well, I had just received my master's in educational technology. Now, mind you, I come from a very different background as far as education. I did not take the traditional route, as
Mhm.
my point of view, growing up in high school and getting ready to go to college was I never ever want to be an educator.
Mhm.
However, I went to college, went into business school. I said, this is where the money's at. I want to be rich. I don't want to be an educator. However, fork in the road moment, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in marketing. And then what happened is I worked in business for about 2 years, 2.5 years. Then fork in the road moment, my dad, became ill, and being an only child, my family depended on me to make sure, hey, we need help getting, dad to appointments and so on. So I didn't have the luxury of having a lot of time with the current job that I had. So I had to really think about things and say, okay, what are my options? And then at the time, a friend of mine said, hey, they're needing math teachers for a local district here close to where you work. And I said, well, let's go ahead and do that. Let's try it. So I called that day. I interviewed the following day, and 10 minutes later they called me up and said, hey, come into HR and sign your paperwork. And so
Wow.
I was like, all right. So I came into education, 11 years in the classroom. However, my trench story really is 2019, getting my master's in educational technology, because technology, I just absolutely love it. And coming into this new role as an instructional tech or instructional coach, really, uh, tech, of course, everything locked down. And I felt like a fish in water. I was
Mhm.
like, yes, this is my moment to shine, because I knew all the platforms. I was, great at doing the trainings with teachers. And talk about getting into the trenches that March 13th, when they said, you know what, we're not coming back.
Mhm.
Then everything just moved online, and I was
Mhm.
doing about 6 sessions a day, Monday through Friday, of online onboarding during my spring break. So, mind you, all teachers, we didn't have a spring break. During that time, I was working, 18 hours a day pretty much, just until the evening. And we had Google Classroom set up for teachers where they can find resources. I was creating videos, how to's, guides, all of that. So it turned out to be one of those moments where, in the heat of it all, it was just like the adrenaline was pumping. I was like, this is it. This is awesome. This is my moment. But then all of a sudden, you burn out.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so talk about being in the trenches, doing six sessions a day, 5 days a week, with about 30 plus teachers, because not everybody could do it in the morning. So I would do morning and afternoon sessions. And then, of course, all the emails that would come in, the onesies and twosies, phone calls that would come in. And luckily, everything was set up, squared away. We, as much as we could,
Yeah.
being
Mhm.
that we were all virtual. So, yeah, that was my moment in the trenches, per se, and it was a memorable moment that, I'll be
Mhm.
honest, it pretty much took a whole year to really recover from that, in the sense that, we finished, virtual learning. We slowly started coming back, and the first year we came back to brick and mortar, I was exhausted. I
Yeah.
really didn't feel like myself. I was very just isolated, very kind of checked out. And it took me about a year to just kind of recover from that, aside from still trying to do my normal duties, you know. So imagine you're trying to recover from burnout, but at the same time, you're still working and finding that work life balance. But man, this year, like I just feel so refreshed. I feel so great. And it just the little 1% things of just kind of reframing your mindset and changing things up physically, exercising, eating well, all those things. Like I just feel like renewed and refreshed. And it's been great. But yeah, that was an interesting moment in the trenches for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of teachers, had that year last year where they kind of recovered from everything that had gone on the past 2 school years, and uh, I think people are feeling better, but just definitely being in that role of having to train people, get them set up, get computers to the students, and all that, like just that monumental task. You mentioned that you were the only ed tech
Yeah.
person in in 14 schools, instructional technology for 14 schools. So,
Yes. So imagine that responsibility. I mean, 14 schools, there's only one of me, and really the only one that is really, I mean, Google certified, Google Innovator, Google everything. And so having to do these lessons now, in hindsight, sometimes I remember when I first got into this role and started doing some of the trainings, nobody wanted to show up in person. So I kind of started doing a PD in your PJs, where I would do these trainings virtually, and then I would have really good attendance. So it was kind of interesting that a little bit of all of that led up to what we were doing. So the teachers that would come to do the PD in your PJs virtually were teachers that really just took off with the tech and just felt very comfortable because they had a little bit of that experience. But it was very interesting that when teachers were kind of forced to kind of dive in and do this, yeah, a lot of them were very uncomfortable, but at the same time, I was just trying to reassure them and let them know that there's absolutely nothing that they can break, nothing that the undo option on their computer cannot fix, and just to get clicky with it and kind of lighten it up a little bit. And that really helped out a lot, where even some of the veteran teachers, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and I was letting them know that even some of the teachers that are the veteran teachers that are very low tech or no tech at all, some of them have just blossomed and are thriving with the tech now, that a lot of them were saying, Mr. Mendoza, I was planning on retiring, after all of this, with the pandemic and, virtual. However, what I've learned as far as the tech is concerned has actually helped me become more efficient. And they're like, I feel like I can teach maybe another, 3 to 5 years, because that longevity, because of the tech and
mm,
getting comfortable with it. And so those are some of the stories that I look at, that I'm like, everything's good, everything is okay. And those stories really just help me just understand that, it's worth the effort, and some people are going to be just fine and great. And it makes me really happy to hear those things.
yeah, and I think some teachers will still use what they learned and
Mhm.
still kind of do that flipped classroom, or integrate more tech into their teaching. There are some that have kind of gone back to the old ways, right? But
Yes, I
like
agree.
as you said, for those people who were kind of tired of the same old and ready to retire, it's great they got a renewed interest in teaching a different way. So there is that light, right? Because we're hearing about people who did retire early, but there is the opposite that occurred as well. So let's talk a little bit about your blog and podcast, My EdTech Life. So you started the podcast first, and then you turned it into a blog as well, and you blog for Medium. So tell me first of all about the podcast, kind of when you got started, what themes, and do you do this solo or with guests?
Absolutely. So, the My EdTech Life podcast started on April 10th of 2020, or 2020. That's when I recorded my very, very first episode. And so on that date, what I had in mind was the following. Everything was shut down, pandemic was happening,
Mhm.
and I am a part of a group of Google innovators and Google educators around the world. And at that time, the group is called Global GEG, which is Google Educators Group. And this was a global group, and you're talking about people from the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and areas all around the world, even into Mexico, Latin America. And
Mhm.
what was happening is we just kind of combined our forces, created a website. We were putting up resources for teachers all around the world in all different languages. And so we started doing, so web sessions. So we were doing virtual trainings. Like, this was completely unpaid. This was just out of the love that we have for tech and out of the love that we have for education. And we wanted to help educators around the world. So we just started doing these training sessions. So I said, you know what? I want to do that kind of like on my own here regionally for my area in deep South Texas. So that is what my intention was. At first, episode one, episode two, bringing in kind of experts in their fields, and then they're sharing some tech and what they can do. But for myself, it just kind of organically started changing into more of a platform to ask educators how they're feeling. What's your story? How are you feeling right now and going through this? So it organically changed, and I think it evolved into what it was meant to be. Because for myself, I have always been intrigued and fascinated by stories, people's stories, where they come from, their origin stories. So if you listen to the podcast right away, the very first thing that I ask is, I want to hear your origin story, because I liken every educator to a superhero, and every superhero has an origin story that might not be, obviously, like you heard from me, it might not be the conventional education route. And for a lot of educators, it hasn't been the conventional education route, and for some of them it has, and some of them have fork in the road moments. And I feel that a lot of those moments really help develop them into who they turn out to be, and with the passion that they have. So essentially, that's what it turned into. It turned into a podcast now where I, host educators, content creators that are coming in, and educators that are content creators, and just to amplify their voices, their stories, hear about their successes, hear about their struggles, hear about things that can inspire others. And so that's really what the podcast is now. And of course, I kind of started blogging on my own too, developing my writing skills. Currently, I'm working on my doctorate, and with my doctoral studies, I've never been a fan of writing, but now all of a sudden it's like,
Mhm.
because I have to write. But I'm like, wow, I can't believe I haven't done this sooner. So now I start writing a little bit more, and I do have a blog on Medium that you all can
Mhm.
check out, and you can get that there through the podcast website too as well. And we just completed our 150th episode this past Saturday. And so again, from April 10th, 2020 till now, it's been quite a journey. It's been amazing stories to hear, connecting with amazing educators, amazing authors, amazing creators. And we're just going to continue going, and putting out that platform for people to come and inspire others and connect with others. So just really excited about that project and how that's been going.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting how it kind of started with that GEG group, and how you then decided to give more resources to people in your region. Was it something you just, when you started, like the first couple episodes, you kind of just shared with people where you live, or within your district, and then kind of expanded that to your whole PLN, or how did that work?
No, actually, I just put it out there for everybody again. And the intent is like, I started having guests on here from my region, and just people
Mhm.
that are known within our circle of educators when we meet at conferences here, local conferences, and so on. So I, had some on, coming in, talking about tech and how they're integrating it. Actually, and my very first guest was is one of my professors from my master's program. He was my very first guest that I had on, and talking about virtual instruction, and where it is that we need to go, where it is, and him, being working with virtual instruction for years as a college professor. He was just kind of sharing some tips and just how to prepare, for what was coming, and how we talking about how we just didn't prepare with enough time or start thinking about these modalities. And one of the best advice that he gave is like, and he still gives, he goes, even though we have all those devices, it just seems like a lot of people hit that off switch and put the tech aside, kind of because they just relate the tech to, oh, this is only for pandemic purposes. So we're back and we don't need to use it anymore. So he's always just been like, hey, you never know when the next thing's going to come up, and we just need to turn that switch on again. So we need to make sure we use those tools. So it kind of just started that way here regionally, but then I started having reaching out to people, nationwide, because again, like wanting to hear stories, because I know what was happening here, but I also wanted my audience here to know what was going on nationwide, in the sense of, I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. So I'm going to, ask other teachers or instructors or anybody that is out there from other parts of the world to come and share their stories, to know that we're all in this together and we're all in this same position, and it may be very different depending on where you're at, but we're all struggling, we're all, going through these tough times. And so they don't feel like, oh man, is this only me, am I the only one? So it kind of just turned into that, organically, like I said. And after that, now it's just building up my, what I call, you call it a PLN, but I call it the PLF, which is my personal learning family, which is pretty much everybody that I connect with on Twitter. I always call, let them know, hey, you're part of my, professional learning family now. So just being able to connect and make those connections with people worldwide and educators really helps out a lot, to be able to share their resources, share their experiences with a lot of my friends here locally, and to be able to see like, hey, there are different ways of doing things, or hey, you know what, we're doing the same thing that they're doing, and they're
Mhm.
having success, and and just connecting education and educators worldwide and nationwide. That's been what it's turning out into also as well.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the work. You talked about the GEG Global Educators Group, but you're also Google Innovator.
Mhm.
In your current role, what is something you do kind of for the district in terms of teacher training that you did before COVID and you're still doing?
Oh, well, one of the things before COVID that also helped out, which was really great, was starting the Google Educator Level 1 certification training modules, and those were completely online, not in person. I mean, I there was a way to do it in person, but of course, what happens is with everybody's schedules, elementary schedules are different from middle school and high school schedules. So I said, you know what, the easiest way to do this, where everybody can get access to this at any time and on their own time, would be just to create these learning modules for the teachers through Google Classroom. And what would that would accomplish would be that many of the teachers that may not be familiar with Google, or Google apps, would be able to use those Google apps and get that training. Um, this was very early in my transition into this role. Just because we were slowly pushing out Google a little bit more and more and more, and that's really the main platform that we use for work and collaboration. We're also a Microsoft district, but that's really mainly just for the basic, which is just the emails. And really, that's it, but Google is for everything else. So, what I started doing is, and actually, one of my master's projects was, you need to solve a real world problem that you have in your district. And so
Mhm.
I said, you know what? Well, this is a problem or a solution to a problem, which would be, giving or showing our teachers what we have available. So although Google, obviously, they offer their own training modules that they had, and now at the time, those training modules were very different than what they are now. So what I went ahead and did is I just kind of put my own spin onto those modules just to
Mm.
make it relatable to what we're doing. Because I mean, those modules, they're very broad, and they give you that practice. But what I started doing is I put our spin on it to fit our district. So all the scenarios and everything that you're going to be using with the platforms and what you're trying to do fits our district. So I put names of our some of our employees in there, and just kind of make it our own. And then of course the scenarios, we're dealing with schools within our district and so on and so forth. And so a lot of teachers just really took to it, and within the first couple of modules or cohorts that we had a tremendous success rate. It was about a 92% success rate. And of course, what it entailed was the teachers would complete their 11 modules, they would complete a post test, and upon completing that post test, they would get and passing that post test, because you had to pass with an 80 or better, then they would receive a voucher from the district so they can go ahead and take the exam. And a lot of them were, sending me their certificates, and it was great. And the fact that they felt more comfortable with the platforms really helped out a lot. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, some of the teachers, the veteran teachers that were a little bit reluctant to use tech, were some of the ones that were just the most excited about, doing these modules and feeling like, wow, this isn't that bad. This is pretty easy,
Mhm.
and how they can go ahead and apply it. So, uh, leading up to that, I was still working on my Innovator project as far
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
applying for Google Innovator. And I did get rejected my very first time that I applied for Google Innovator, because I was kind of going at it alone, and I didn't know what to do, what to expect. But then the next year came about and they opened up the applications. And so a friend of mine, Micah Shippey, reached out to me and said, hey, when they open up the applications, contact me and we'll have a meeting. And I was like, okay. So applications opened, I contacted him, and he's like, hey, this is what I want you to do. And the best advice he gave was really connect with other Google innovators. That's really all he said. He goes, the best thing that you can do is go on Twitter, type in hashtag Google EI, and anybody that shows up with with Google EI on their profile, he said, I don't care if you know them or not, just click follow. Follow
Mhm.
every single one of them. And as you're working on your project, he kind of gave me some direction. And of course, my project ended up changing at the end. Um, gave me some direction. He said, reach out to them and set up a meeting. Say, hey, can I take 20 minutes of your time to, pitch my project and maybe give me some
Mhm.
suggestions as to what I can do. And I went ahead and did that, had a couple of meetings with some wonderful innovators, educators, and of course, very active on social media now, connecting with the groups and so on. And then all of a sudden, I get some great news, coming to, what is it, 2021? I think it was in August, received some great news, or was it June still? June, July, or July? In
Mhm.
July. And then I got accepted to the first Google Innovator Academy that was virtual, which is
Okay.
the Virtual Innovator Academy of 2021. And got to connect with some amazing educators around the world, and work on our Google Innovator projects. And it was just an amazing experience that I definitely recommend for anybody who is interested in becoming a Google Innovator. Really, all you need is just your level 1 certification. And when that application opens up, apply, connect with innovators like myself, and we will definitely help you, work on your project. And because they only select a few, and I think it was only at that time, it was only 87 of us worldwide.
Mhm.
I don't know if the academies have grown a little bit more this year, because there's different, of course, areas as far as Latin America. Then, of course, there's the Europe. There's of course, United States. So the Innovator Academies might have grown a little bit more now that it's virtual, but it is a wonderful experience that will for sure be, something that has played a big role in where I am today. And of course, because of the power of connections as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear kind of how that started with just kind of putting your own spin on the Google Level 1 certification. That's
Mhm.
something I did a few years prior to that back in 2016. And that was that old version, like you said. And I just did their standard certification. It didn't have any spin. But yeah, definitely something, teachers can gain a lot from. I know there's so there's a Google Level 1, Google Level 2, Innovator, and were there not a few
Yeah,
other?
there's the trainer and then there's the coach
Okay,
also as well. So the newest one they added was the coaching one because
okay,
normally it was level 1, level 2 trainer and then innovator, and now they added that coaching component because as you know, and I think we kind of mentioned pre-chat, the tech coach or the instructional coach is something that a lot more districts now are implementing after virtual instruction, and just to be able to help and build capacity with teachers and help them out, and planning lessons and so on. So now they've added that coaching component into the Google certifications.
mhm, mhm. So there are probably people listening who are in a role that, maybe they're working on a master's program and they'd like to maybe start applying for ed tech coach roles because more and more districts are hiring several ed tech coaches because they know there is a need. So, what is some advice you can give for people who are looking into those roles?
Yes, best advice. And I'm only speaking from my experience. It may be different now because this was about 5 years ago when I transitioned into this role, but what helped me was putting our work on social media.
Mhm.
And I mean, just be cautious too. I'm a big proponent of child safety and so on, so I know that there's a lot of teachers that put their students on social media and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of that, but putting in their work. And what I would do is I would always videotape, and I would always, or, record on my phone. They
Yeah.
would record video, and I would just put those pieces together. And it was just them and their little hands working and so on. And so putting a lot of that stuff on social media is good. What it is that you're doing, how it is that you're innovating using the resources that you have, because oftentimes you may be in school district that is not maybe as well equipped as other school districts nearby. We all know that the funding is different for a lot of areas depending on the number of students that you have. But when you show what you can do with the resources that
Mhm.
you have, that really helps out a lot. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. My number one advice would be, or piece of advice would be, do not fall into the imposter syndrome. Um, don't let yourself, get in your own head and say, well, they're better than I am. They do this better and so on. No, you confidently put out your work, you do what you do, and don't compare yourself to others because imposter syndrome can really hold you back. So
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things that I've learned there. And then obviously just be very proficient with your tech. Don't use tech for tech's sake and just try and squeeze it into every lesson. Find those specific points, those specific lessons where the tech will definitely enhance and maybe even redefine the learning, rather than just substituting the tech and saying, well, instead of having a paper worksheet, now we just have a digital worksheet,
Mhm.
and use tech there, which it does serve a purpose. But try and think outside the box. Don't be afraid to step out of your own comfort zone and try new things. Being vulnerable is part of being a teacher. It's
Mhm.
okay to not know everything, but have fun and enjoy, and just have a good personality. And I guess you can, make sure you come in with some thick skin too as well, because
Mhm.
sometimes when
Mhm.
you're working with teachers, and veteran teachers, they're used to doing things a certain way, and sometimes we may want to come in with that excitement of, hey, no, do it this way and so on. You learn real quick that the easiest way to do this is just to, you know build the relationship. And then again, like I told you, just let them know it's like there's nothing that you can break, nothing that undo can't
Mhm.
fix, and just get clicky with it and have fun. So those are some little tidbits of advice there that I could share for sure.
Okay, great, great. Well, we've talked a lot about how you transitioned into your current role, how you got started in education in the first place, and also your origin story of being that tech coach in your district and navigating the shutdown and the transition to virtual learning. Out of everything we discussed on the podcast today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Actually, what I would love listeners to remember is share your story. You know, I know right now I got to share my story, and a lot of, guests that come here to this show will share their story, but don't be afraid to share your story, because you never know who is out there that is watching or listening, and they're waiting for you to say that one little thing that can change their lives, and and for the better. You never know the influence that you will have. So the best thing that I can leave you with to always remember is, don't be afraid to share your story.
Yeah, it's definitely something to remember. Everybody has a story to share, and like, don't let the imposter syndrome get in the way, like you
Yes,
said.
for sure. Don't let that get in the way.
Where can people connect with you and find you online?
Yeah, actually, you can find me on all socials, and I'm talking about all socials at My EdTech Life, and you can connect with us there. You can also go to our website, myedtech.life, and there you can go ahead and find all our 150 episodes, and you can scroll through them. Wonderful educators from around the world, creators, where you can go ahead and get inspired, get some ideas to sprinkle on to what you all are already doing great. So give us a visit, follow us. I'd love to connect with you all. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to shoot a DM. And if I don't have the answer to it, I can guarantee you that I can connect you with somebody that may be able to help. And again, I'm always here to serve.
Great. It was a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.